Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you, Professor Wilson, for joining this seminar. This is the today's session of our seminar about ebook in public libraries. We are talking today about the Swedish situation, and thank you very much, Professor Wilson, for joining us today. We are some people in the room, and some other people are following us on the internet, on our website. I propose to start your presentation, and we'll have, after that, question and answer session to discuss all these points.
Okay.
Okay?
So you would like me to begin now?
Yes. Please.
Okay, fine. Okay, well, perhaps I'd better say a little bit about who you're looking at right now. I'm actually retired for some years from the University of Sheffield, where I was head of the Department of Information Studies for 15 years. And in my retirement, I am working in Sweden at the University of Borås. And about a couple of years ago, we applied for and obtained a grant from the Swedish Research Council to explore the ebook phenomenon from authorship through to readership. So we're engaged in a series of investigations, interviews with authors, surveys of public libraries. We're just about to start on survey of academic libraries. We've done a survey of publishers, and so on and so forth. So this is quite a big project, a 4-year project, with a grant of 12 million Swedish krona, which is, I think, about 1.4 million euros for the period of time. So it's a substantial project. And we have an ebook research group composed of 2 colleagues from the University of Gothenburg and the rest of us from the University of Borås. The participants from the University of Gothenburg are working chiefly with a national media survey called the SOM survey, which goes out to a random sample of the Swedish population every year, and in which we have placed questions relating to ebook use. So we get a national picture of how ebooks are being used in Sweden in general. And otherwise, we are doing custom studies, as I've explained. So if I can move into the presentation, I'll just bring up the first slide on the screen. That's the title. But the first main slide that I want to show is this map of Sweden, because I think it's important to understand the context that we're talking about. The separate coloured areas are the different lands in Sweden, equivalent to the département in France. And as you say, they vary enormously in size, with the ones in the north consuming about 1/3 of the country in 2 land, and the rest of them in the more highly populated areas being smaller. Sweden has a land area a little less than France. It's 449,964 square kilometers. France is a bit bigger at 551,500. It has a population, however, of only 9.6 million, compared with France's 66 million, which gives you a population density of 21 people per square kilometer. compared with France, which has 114 people per square kilometre. Now, of course, that population density is not even all over the country. In fact, 40% of the population of Sweden lives in just 7 cities with more than 100,000 population. Now, the biggest of which, of course, is the capital city, Stockholm, with 1.3 million people. And as you see, Sweden is long and narrow, 1,574 kilometers from end to end. Now, that's just about the same distance, it turns out, as it is from where I am sitting in Borås to where you are sitting in Lyon. So to get from Borås to Lyon, you have to go through all the European countries before you get to Lyon. So it is a very lengthy country, very, very strung out, and of course less highly populated in the far north than it is in the south because of the climatic conditions. So that's the geographical situation of the country, as it were. And if we look at the public libraries in Sweden, there are quite a lot of them, 290 public libraries in Sweden, mainly small municipalities. And on top of those small municipalities, mainly small municipalities, Stockholm is a big city library system with 40 branches. But outside of Stockholm, Malmö, Gothenburg, the municipalities are rather small. And on top of those municipalities, you have 20 county or regional library systems, which are not separate library service points, but support services for the rest of the public library system. Originally, they supported the smaller libraries with interlibrary lending services, deposit collections of additional books, and advice and consultancy generally. Today, they do more of that consultancy, professional training, and promotion of reading in the community kinds of activities. A central authority was established for the public library system in Sweden in 1913, and that role is now performed by the Swedish Arts Council. And in addition to the public library system as a whole, as you see it on the screen there are 3 lending centres based on the public libraries in Stockholm, Malmö and Umeå. Stockholm in the centre, Malmö in the south, Umeå in the north. And in addition to the 3 lending centres, there's a foreign literature repository based in Stockholm, and a national repository library of little used materials, out of print material which is no longer active, and so on and so forth, which is in the National Depository in Umeå, and material is placed there by public libraries and school libraries, depositing stock that they no longer need in their local library. As an example of the county library kind of activity, we can see Uppsala County Library. It has a commitment to develop libraries in the whole of Uppsala County through further training, counselling, gathering intelligence, and so forth. And these are its specific aims and objectives: to pursue the development of skills through further education for library staff, initiate projects, stimulate the development of county library activities, cooperate with other regional institutions, building networks, supporting the county libraries with supplementary supplies of media and information, and spreading knowledge of Uppland's cultural heritage and of literary Uppland. So this diffusion of the local culture, if you like, and the promotion of the local culture is a significant part of the activities of the county library services. Right, turning to ebooks, since this is part of a series about ebooks, I guess you know all of this already, so nothing will be new. An ebook is a book composed in or converted to digital format for display on a computer screen or handheld device. As simple as that. And it has its origins in 1971 when Michael Hart placed online a digital copy of the US Declaration of Independence, which became the first volume in Project Gutenberg, which now has rather more material than that. And the growth in ebooks as a modern phenomenon is really the result of the development of mobile computing. I guess it was only the computer geeks who used ebooks when you had to consult them on a desktop computer, and probably also when you had to consult them on a laptop. But as soon as the practical portable e-reader was developed, and even more when the iPad hit the market with its tablet computer, and more recently when smartphones have been developed, as a result of the ability to read on the move, the growth of ebooks mushroomed. So this is, if you like, the primary cause of the sudden development of the ebook as a publishing phenomenon. But of course, it's not the same everywhere. If you look at the picture for the USA, for example, you can see the amount of growth that there has been and that it's forecast up to 2018. And you'll see that these are in billions of US dollars spent on ebooks. And in 2008, it was 270 million, a minuscule amount, compared with what is forecast for 2018, when more than $8.5 billion is expected to be spent on the purchase of ebooks. But you'll notice that the curve has flattened somewhat. It was going up almost exponentially up to 2014, but from 2014 the annual increase is shown to be rather lower. So there is a flattening of the demand for ebooks. Now, whether that is the result of the austerity period that we've all been suffering from, whether it is simply that the market has been satisfied and all the people who want to use ebooks are now using them, is difficult to determine. And I guess it's only when the recession and austerity are finally overtaken by economic growth that we will find out if there's any resurgence in the market. I suspect that there won't be, because if you look at the reasons why people use ebooks, there's one dominant feature, and that is the ability to read on the move. If you have a long journey to work time and you're traveling by public transport, or perhaps a shared car in a carpool, then this is an opportunity to read. And instead of carrying books around with you, you can simply have your smartphone and you can read from that. Or you have an e-reader like the Kindle, or a tablet computer like the iPad, and you can read, you can store on these hundreds of books. So you can always have something available. And there is a limit to the number of people who travel in that way. And I suspect that that proportion of the population sets the limit to how far ebook use will expand. Because if you look at usage information from surveys, you find that even the people who are quite enthusiastic about ebooks are reading ordinary books when they're at home, printed books when they're at home. So the two things are going to exist side by side, and the notion that e-books are going to completely take over, I think, is a bit of journalistic nonsense. I don't think it's going to happen. It would be difficult for the publishers to make it happen given the degree of uncertainty about the market. When you look at the English language market, you can see that it is completely different from the rest of the world. And this is an image from a study by Bowker Corporation about 2 years ago. And it shows you on the blue part of the image, the blue part of the line, is the number of respondents to the survey who said that they had used ebooks. The green element is people who were aware of ebooks but had not used them, and the yellow element is people who were not aware of ebooks at all. And as you can see, there's quite a geographical difference and an associated language difference. You look at the most highly aware countries, USA, Australia, UK, India, they're all English speaking. There are 340 million English speakers in India. So we can regard India as an English speaking country, although it's got dozens of other languages as well. And when you look at other countries, you see that there's a lower proportion of use. And this lower proportion of use obviously has cultural factors, economic factors, technology development factors, and so on and so forth, affecting the situation. It's not a simple picture. For example, the low use of ebooks in France, although it's growing over the past 2 years, may be a consequence that there is a lower degree of smartphone penetration in France than there is in quite a number of other European countries. Japan, they may have a low usage because they have a very high penetration of printed bookshops, and printed books are relatively cheap in Japan. And interestingly, the e-book phenomenon which is used in Japan is not books in the normal sense, but manga. They're comic books. This is the biggest single use for e-books in Japan. So there are cultural, linguistic, and other factors that come to bear on whether or not e-books are used to any significant extent in one country or another. When we look at e-books and public libraries, there are some things which make the e-book different from a printed book. E-books can't be regarded as books in the sense in which public libraries generally treat books. First of all, an e-book isn't purchased, usually, it's licensed. So access to the e-book is allowed by the license. You can't store the e-book permanently. In fact, it's stored on the provider's server in the case of Sweden, not on the library server. You can't interlend it. Very often you can't print anything from it. In some cases you can't even copy a section from it to use elsewhere. So e-books are different from printed books in this respect. The second point is that public libraries don't have the technology platforms on which to mount e-books and lend them, even if they could buy them outright. They don't have the technology available to do this. And providing that technology would be a significant cost. Publishers also put restrictions on e-books in one way or another. They may put restrictions on the number of loans you can have for the license. or they may say you can only lend the ebook to one person at a time, as though it was a physical book, or they may inflate prices so that in fact it is totally uneconomic to borrow the ebook. And then you have third-party aggregators like Overdrive, which operates in the USA and the UK. These enter the market, and there is a danger of a monopoly situation arising, because if one of those third-party aggregators comes to dominate the market, then the price might very well rise. And as I said, access is not on the library side. It's highly likely to be on the provider side. When we turn to ebooks in Swedish public libraries, I think that a number of things, cultural, legal things, affect the situation here. Historically, Sweden was a very poor country. In, let's say, 1850, for example, it was at about the same level of economic development as somewhere like Malawi is today. You have to remember the speed with which economic development has taken place in a country like Sweden over the past 100 years. Really completely transformed out of all recognition. In 1850, there were only 3.4 million people in the country. All of those 449,000 square kilometers, and only 3.4 million people there. And between 1850 and 1930, there was massive migration, especially to America. By comparison, at the same time, France had 10 times as many people. It had 34 million people in 1850. So perhaps because of this thinly spread population, there was a great need for both self-reliance, because you were in small scattered communities, you had to manage independently, but also there's a great need for collaboration and cooperation with your neighbors, because in emergency, these were the only people you had to rely upon. So you have this kind of dichotomy in the Swedish ethos of self-reliance and independence, and yet a high degree of collaboration going on, which might seem completely contradictory, but that's the way it works. So out of this you get a national ethos for the provision of collaborative services in the community, out of which the public library services grew. And Sweden, in spite of this, the early development of public libraries in Sweden, it didn't actually have a public library law until as late as 1997. And that has just been revised, and there's a very important provision in it that resources must be available in all media, which means that if an ebook exists and the readers want it, you have to provide it. So, you know, there's no indication in the revision of the library law how this is to be paid for, but it is a legal requirement that you have to have resources in all of the available media. Not only that, but all materials must be loaned free of charge. There are no payments to by the readers of the public library. And also a key element in the public library law is that every citizen shall have access to a library. So you have bookmobiles going out to ensure that every citizen does have access to a library. The public lending rights system already exists in Sweden as well, to pay authors for books that are loaned, but this doesn't cover ebooks. In other words, in law, an ebook is not regarded as a book. It's regarded as a licensed computer service, in effect, which to a certain extent is reasonable. So what's going on? Well, In 2001, eLib was established by the three largest publishers in Sweden. It was then joined by a fourth large publisher. Bonnier is probably the best known of these internationally because it also operates globally. But there's another one that you may have heard of, Norstedts, Natur och Kultur, and Piratförlaget are the four biggest publishers in Sweden. Smaller publishers make use of the eLib services to deliver their ebooks to the public library system, but those are the four big ones. And they had a monopoly in the situation until 2013, when another provider, Atingo, was established by a book distributor, Publit, which is one of the biggest book distributors in the world, and Axiel, a library IT company. And they are working to deliver a system which will compete with eLib, and in fact which is already competing with eLib. A number of public library systems have moved over to Atingo from eLib. And then in 2014, Stockholm Public Library began its own collaboration with Publit and the publisher Ordfront to develop a system specifically for Stockholm Public Library for access to Ordfront's output. It's important to note that until round about 2008, the eLib service was well ahead of anything else in the rest of the world. Sweden was leading the field in the provision of ebook service to public libraries through eLib. There was no DRM on the books, no restrictions on the number of loans. The system of payment was that the library paid 20 krona, about €2, for every loan. And it could lend as many ebooks as it could afford. And no limits at all on how many people could borrow a book at the same time, no limits at all on how long they could go on borrowing the book. So eLib was well ahead of the rest of the world, and in fact, in terms of those characteristics, I don't think the rest of the world has yet caught up with Sweden. Things changed in 2008 because until then the demand was low, and the libraries could afford to meet the relatively low demand without too much damage to their materials budget. Things changed in 2008 because a footballer, now playing for Paris Saint-Germain, published his autobiography, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and demand for the ebook version of his memoirs went through the roof and caused enormous problems for the public libraries because they now found that their budget was being attacked by the ebook phenomenon. And demand for ebooks started to grow and has kept on growing ever since, although it's also slackened off here over the past year or so to a degree. The extent of ebook lending is still only a small proportion of the total book lending, perhaps 2 to 3% overall. And for the population in general, ebook reading is very low. 91.4% have never read an ebook. We get that data from the SOM survey that I mentioned earlier, that our colleagues at the University of Gothenburg are using. So we know that this is pretty accurate. It's, accurate to within plus or minus 5% or thereabouts. So it's a tiny minority of people who have used ebooks, and the number, it's only 1% that have used ebooks every week in the previous year, read an ebook every week, 1% of the total population. Access to the ebooks is through the eLib website, linked from the library site. So if you went on the web, for example, to any of the public libraries in Sweden, here in Borås, for example, and you clicked on the ebooks link, and then you clicked on an individual cover image, that would then immediately take you through to the eLib server, and you would be out of the public library system. And all the records of demand and usage and so forth are on the eLib site, not on the local library site. Now, that is one of the things that is changing with Atingo, because Atingo makes available an API which enables the library to keep all of that information on its own servers. And the lending is apparently done, so far as the user is concerned, the lending is apparently done from the library's own server. In fact, it's coming from the Atingo server, but the user is not aware of that. Now, this is a changing situation, as I've said, and we don't know exactly how it's going to go. But when we surveyed public libraries a couple of years ago, we'll be surveying them again this year. When we surveyed them a couple of years ago, a number of issues were brought to our attention, problems that they were experiencing. The first thing, the dominant thing, is that the librarians felt that the eLib model prevented them from doing a proper professional job. They couldn't select what they wanted. They had to take what was offered. So directly trying to serve the needs of the community was not possible for them. They had to take what was given. And this, they felt, was an erosion of their professional standing. The second thing is that because of the growth in demand, although still low, budgeting becomes a problem. It's a small amount, €2 per loan, but if you are lending several thousand ebooks, that is several thousand, tens of thousands of krona that you can't spend on printed books. So the libraries have to decide how they're going to deal with this, and because they set a budget, some libraries are stop lending books at a particular point every month when the budget for that month has been exceeded. Some of them carry on spending, but may stop lending ebooks, let us say in October, because they haven't got any money left in the budget. Right? So planning the budget becomes something of a headache for public librarians. They can't do it because the demand is uncertain and the demand has been growing. The other problem that the librarians experience, which again erodes their professional status, is that the publishers control access, and they can change the status of an item at any time. They can remove it from availability if it shows signs of selling well in the bookstores. They can take away the eLib access, or they can change the status of an item at any time, so that something that was openly available might suddenly be restricted in the number of loans that you can have for it. And so this is very unsatisfactory from the point of view of the librarians. Further problems arise as a result of the new system that eLib introduced in 2014. Because of the problems with the previous system, they decided to have a new system. And this new system seems to have as many problems as the old system had, because they now have 3 levels of pricing. Pay per loan, the 20 krona per loan as previously, but the price set by the publisher. So for books that are in the backlist, let us say, and are not being sold and are not being used, they might say, okay, 1 krona per loan. For something which is fairly recent and still quite active, they might say not 20 krona per loan, but 35 krona per loan. So it's down to the publisher to decide the price at which they're going to make something available. A second element in the model is license model A. This is a fixed fee for a limited number of loans. You can decide to pay 100 krona, let us say, for 50 loans of this particular book. And then you have license model B, fixed fee for an unlimited number of loans. So from the relatively simple model that was causing problems previously, we now have a more complex model in which the librarian has to spend more time making decisions on which of these elements to accept in relation to any individual book in the system. So it's more work for the librarian, probably more costly in the end because of the high price of some of the books, and no more satisfactory than the old model. So I don't know that this has changed things, and it's perhaps only the emergence of the Atingo model that which is already attracting customers from eLib. I think 24 library systems have now converted to Atingo from eLib. First of all, the API enables the library to maintain all the data about lending and price and so forth on its own library servers. There is greater variation in the cost of titles with the price set by the publisher, which will vary over time. And all titles from the publisher are available. The rationing is done by price rather than by putting an embargo on a title and saying you can't have the e-version for 6 months or a year or whatever. So this gives the library greater flexibility and more control over spending. But the problems of budgeting are likely to remain because of the uncertain demand levels that there will be for ebooks. Now, what's the reaction from libraries to these developments? As I said, some libraries have moved from eLib to Atingo. Some are hoping that the new Stockholm Public Library with Publit can be extended to other libraries in Sweden and can engage more publishers. That seems to be a strong wish, which we'll be exploring later this year. And some have pulled out of e-lending completely because of the budgetary uncertainty. Most significant of these is the Östergötland County Library, which is on the east coast of Sweden, south of Stockholm. And Östergötland County Library withdrew from its agreement with eLib, thereby affecting the 13 municipalities that were using the service, because Östergötland County Library was the negotiator with eLib, and they held the contract for the provision of services. So when the county library pulled out of the agreement, the 13 member libraries, municipal libraries, were affected by this. The reason that they pulled out was that charging for the service was done on a per capita basis. So the biggest municipalities paid most. And some of these municipalities objected to paying most. And the county library was having to find the resources from elsewhere. And also on about the 15th of every month, the budget had been used up and the service had to be withdrawn. So this was quite a problem. And elsewhere there have been difficulties. Norrköping, for example, an old industrial city in Sweden. The problem is that our costs for e-books increased fivefold between 2011 and 2012. And this year we've almost doubled the cost again. We've already made changes in priorities in the media budget. Where should we cut down further and for which users? Should we reduce the purchase of fiction and just offer digitally literate users access? So this is the dilemma that public libraries are facing, that if they provide the e-book service, they run the risk of damaging their other services in the public library. So it's a problem, and it's a problem, I think, that is possibly unlikely to be resolved very soon. Now, as part of our investigations, we provided colleagues in Lithuania and Croatia with our survey of publishers in order to get some comparative information from other, what we've called small language markets, i.e. markets with a limited number of speakers of the native language. And for example, Lithuania has 2.9 million people, Croatia has 3.4 million people, Sweden has 9.6 million people. So these are small language markets. And I don't know if you can see that picture very well from where you're sitting, but we put a number of propositions to the publishers that e-books should be sold to libraries in the same way as printed books, that e-books should be allowed to be loaned for a limited number of loans, that e-books should be priced higher for libraries than printed books, or that e-books should not be made available to public libraries. Now, interestingly, if we look at the last one, by far the biggest majority of publishers disagreed with that last proposition. Very few of them wanted to see e-books not available to public libraries. Now, you can understand why that is the case in Sweden, because public libraries account for something like 84% of the total book market in Sweden. They are the biggest buyers of books in Sweden. Purchase by individuals is a relatively tiny minority, right? So clearly, the publishers are not going to want public libraries not to have e-books available. And clearly in the other two countries, something similar must be operating because high proportions are found there. We get some conflict of going on in the publishers' heads, I think, when we look at the other information. On the one hand, in each country, a majority agree that e-books should be sold to libraries in the same way as printed books. 67% in Sweden, 67% in Lithuania, 77% in Croatia. But at the same time, a majority also believe that e-books should not be allowed to be loaned for an indefinite number of times. There should be a limit to the number of loans. 53% in Sweden, 53% in Lithuania, 58% in Croatia. Fortunately, none of them, or a minority only in each country, believe that e-books should be priced higher for libraries. Close to 50% in Sweden and Lithuania, 47% each, 39% in Croatia. So the interesting thing about this comparative analysis in these three small language countries is the very high degree of similarity in the opinions of the publishers in those three countries. Very similar ideas about e-books being made available and the terms under which they should be made available. Right, this leads me to my conclusion. You're probably familiar with the theory of innovation by Richard Rogers, where he talks about early developers lagging leaders and so on and so forth. Well, the lending of e-books from public libraries in Sweden is still at the early developer stage in terms of Rogers' theory of innovation. You can tell this by the proportion of books that are borrowed compared with printed books, 2 or 3% of total borrowing. And there is as yet no nationally available platform that gives public libraries a firm hold over their budgets, although the Atingo model may go a bit further in achieving this. And other providers may come into the market and introduce new models. For example, for the past 2 or 3 years, it has been said that Amazon is going to open up in Sweden. In spite of all the rumors to this effect, Amazon is not yet in the Swedish market. But if it does come into the market, it could very well set up its own lending system for books. It already has a lending system for people who use their Prime service. So what's to stop them extending it to libraries? I think whatever the outcome, all we can be sure of is that the future will be very different from the past. But in saying that, I think your author, French author Simone Weil, said the future is made of the same stuff as the present. So perhaps for some time to come, we're likely to see more of the same rather than something crucially different. Whoops. Oh, you're back again. Fine. Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's very interesting for us to see that the Swedish situation was in the 2000s kind of for ebook lending in libraries, and today we can observe the difficulties they have to increase their model.
Yes.
I have maybe some questions about your presentation. The first is about the stack of owning platforms for libraries to manage the ebook lending offer. You say that the libraries didn't have the technological resources to develop their own platform, but
yes, yes.
In your conclusion, you said that it's difficult for libraries to find a way to manage their budgets and to have some preservation of their ebook, of the ebook they want to loan. Do you think that there is a stack in libraries, in Swedish libraries, to develop some cooperative infrastructure or platform?
There has been some talk about the National Library in Sweden, the Royal Library, entering into discussions with an IT provider with the possibility of developing a national e-lending platform for libraries. But so far that doesn't seem to have come to anything. So I think that there is, one of the problems is that whatever is developed will have to negotiate access with all of the individual publishers. And there are something like 150 publishers in Sweden. So anybody setting up a separate system will have to negotiate access with all of the publishers, which in itself is a big job. Whatever technological infrastructure is developed will have to interact with the technology systems of those 150 publishers. Some of them may not have highly developed technology infrastructures. Some of these 150 publishers consist of 1, 2, or 3 people producing 2 or 3 books a year, right?
Yes.
So the very logistics of actually establishing something different are going to be, I think, a major barrier to producing a public infrastructure for ebook lending. And I think that for the time being, the libraries are going to be dependent upon either eLib or Atingo.
Yeah.
And it may be that Atingo will come to dominate, because behind Atingo you have Publit, this big book distributor, one of the biggest book distributors in the world, Publit. And they are obviously continually involved in negotiations with individual publishers for their normal book distribution activities. And it may be that they will be able to put in place a better system than eLib have been able to. And so I think people are looking to Atingo and Publit as perhaps the next best alternative to a public system. Sorry, can't hear anything there. No. Still. Ah.
Does it work?
Okay. Yes, I hear you now. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
So
Yeah.
I'm with Hi, Gislaine. I'm professor in Paris in Library Information Science.
Sorry, could you say again?
Hello, you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. I want to ask some questions about, have you compared the situation between Swedish libraries, Swedish ebook situations with other countries?
Okay, right. Comparison between Sweden and other countries.
Yes.
Okay, well, as I said at the beginning, the big difference is between English-speaking countries and everywhere else. And I think that the dominant thing that you find here is, if you look, for example, at Spanish, that is a big language market. And use of ebooks is spreading quite a lot in Spain. There's a great deal of public lending activity going on in Spain of ebooks. Every day there are news items of new public libraries lending ebooks in Spain. And of course they also have a big Latin American market. So they have a much bigger language market in which to operate, just as the English language market is a much bigger market. Whereas a country like Sweden, 9.36 million people, that's the total limit of your market. Okay, people in Norway and Denmark can read Swedish without any difficulty, right? The languages are dialects of one another, so they can read Swedish. But nobody knows how many people in Norway and Denmark read Swedish, so we don't know how big the market is there for them. There's some kind of extraneous noise on the microphone. I'm here a whoomp, 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 whoomp.
We'll try to fix that. Okay, let me try something.
Yeah.
Is it better?
Yes, that's gone. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's now disappeared. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Next question.
Yes, I have some question about you described the eLib management issues.
Yes.
And the introduction of the paper loan model. in 2014. Is that,
Yes.
is that right?
Yes.
My question is that this model allowed the definition or some evaluation of a market price for the loan for paper loan system. If you offer.
Yes, in effect, this Swedish collaboration with Public and Ordfront that I mentioned, this is the one you're interested in.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, they have evolved. What happened there was that Stockholm Public Library provided the resources to digitize the whole of Ordfront's backlist.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And as a result of that, they get access to all of the items on the backlist at a very low price, a very low price. And in return, Ordfront makes available its current output entirely without restriction. So it doesn't have embargoes on the bestsellers or anything like that. It makes everything available, but at a variation in prices, depending upon how old the book is, the popularity, and so on. So, in effect, a market is being established on the basis of the recency and popularity of the item in the collection. And if the book is more than 4 months old, the price immediately drops, for example. The loan price immediately drops after 4 months. So this gives the library an opportunity to say, okay, well, we can't afford to lend this yet, but if you wait a few months, we'll have it available.
Okay.
Right, so they can negotiate with their readers, if you like.
Yeah. And does this system or this model shows some kind of new usage or patterns for the library users?
I think it's a bit too early to find that out yet. It was only introduced towards the end of 2014, so I think it might be a bit too early to know. Okay. We'll be trying to find out things like that when we survey the libraries again towards the end of this year. So we'll be hoping to have some data on that.
Okay.
Yes. I think that it is a very difficult situation with ebook prices for publishers as for libraries. I think that it's normal that it is established situations because it's difficult for publishers too to fix a price. There are concurrent markets between individual market and library market. What do you think about that?
Okay. Yes. Well, as I said, the situation in Sweden is very unusual because of the dominant role of the public library in the book market generally. 84% of sales to public libraries. Right? So, to a certain extent, there's almost no other commercial market. You know. The rest of the world is 16%. You know, this is.
It's not the situation in France. It's not the same. It's not the same situations in France.
Right.
Yeah, an individual market for publishing.
Yes, yes, yes. And in France, of course, you have fixed prices, don't you, for books, whether they are e-books or printed books.
Yes.
You have a fixed price. There's no fixed price for books in Sweden.
But what do you think about this model? If we have a national license for books, like we have in scholarly publishing, why we can't imagine a situation where the state, by the region, buy a national license for books, and we don't speak about loan, about home price per loan, and so on. If we have a global price.
Right,
No?
right.
Is it possible?
Yes, it's a difficult one. I think that's really a matter for that isn't an issue that we have found librarians talking about. It doesn't seem to be an issue for them. The biggest issue, I think, for librarians is twofold. One is that if they want to buy books, if they want to buy e-books, the VAT rate is much higher for e-books than it is for printed books, as it is in many other countries. And the other issue they have with regard to that is that how can I describe it? The old eLib model of the 20 krona per loan was a manageable problem, right? Whereas the new model that is being brought in makes it, to my mind, less manageable. Or have I misunderstood your question?
Yeah.
Did I answer the question, or did I misunderstand the question?
Yes. You answer.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Another question is about the librarians facing this question. How the librarians are they speaking or reacting facing these budget difficulties? Are they considering that their budget should grow in order to offer some more e-books to their users, or do they choose the other way that and asking publishers to lower the price for lending in libraries?
Yeah. What they're looking, well, what Östgötland, for example, which was pulled out of the agreement with eLib, what they are saying is that if the government and the library law wants us to engage in e-book lending, then they're going to have to give us more resources, because we can't cope with the situation as it is. And you know, they're in a big dilemma. This is only 2 or 3% of all their lending activity, and yet it's causing them these problems. And as the librarian from Norrköping said, you know, who's going to suffer from this? What else do we do in order to provide this service? Do we stop lending printed books to people in order to satisfy this 2 or 3%? You know, it's a ridiculous situation. It's a ridiculous situation. And I wouldn't be surprised if more libraries withdrew from e-book lending in Sweden because of this budgetary uncertainty and because of the relatively low demand.
Yes, but in the other way, if the libraries didn't offer more e-books, they cannot observe a growth of demand.
Oh, sure, yes, and one of the municipal libraries in East Götland has said that this is really a disastrous move, because with the e-book service they were able to attract people who had not used the public library before. And now they're losing them again. They probably won't come back. So, yes, that's another dilemma that the librarians face. And of course, over the past 10 years or so, there's been a gradual decline in public library borrowing in Sweden, just as there has been in many countries. It's very, very small, only about 2% or thereabouts over the past 10 years. But still, they don't want to deter people from using the systems. So getting rid of the e-books means perhaps getting rid of some recent users as well.
My question is related to this exactly. Why are the two less borrowers for e-books in libraries? Because is it because of a technical problem, or is it because the library can't see or target new users, or is it because people are famous or addicted to e-book to printed book? Why did library do research? Why there's the percentage of readers doesn't grow? Why this problem in Sweden? We know that. Is it because the language, the offer is not rich in languages, the diversity? Why this low percentage?
Okay, let me see if I've understood the question first. Right? Is the question first, why are libraries engaging in e-book lending anyway? Is that
no? Why there is no much users or readers for e-book in libraries?
Why there are so few users?
Yes.
Okay. Why there is?
Libraries where this?
Okay. Why are there so few users? Well, that's a difficult question. Why are there so few users of e-books in the public libraries? I think that one of the things is that Sweden is very much a reading culture, right? As a society. It reads. The use of public libraries has very high penetration in the population compared with many other countries, right? And so you have, if you like, lifelong readers, and lifelong readers read printed books. And probably also we're talking about lots of relatively small communities, 50,000 population and less, right? And in many of these cases, they will be static in these communities. They won't be commuting. Small communities around Stockholm or Gothenburg or Malmö, people will be commuting to the big cities and are perhaps using e-books to read on the train and so on. Right? In the smaller scattered communities with no big hub to attract like that, they aren't doing the moving. And so the advantage of the e-book as something you can read on your tablet or your smartphone doesn't apply to them because they're static. Right? So I think it's this this connection between the reading culture on the one hand, which promotes the printed book, and the scattered communities where there's no commuting taking place, except in relation to the big cities, probably accounts for the relatively low use of e-books from the public libraries. It's a complex of factors.
Can you tell us which is the budget of a common library in Sweden?
Sorry, the subject of?
The budget of a public library in Sweden. How much is it?
Sorry, I'm still not getting it. There's some interference on the headphones.
The question is about the budget. The budget of public libraries in Sweden.
Yes, a question about the budget.
How much is it?
How much is it?
Yes.
Ah, well, varies enormously. In Stockholm, it's several million krona. In a small city like Borås, it will be several 100,000 krona. There's huge variation in the size of the budget from city to city.
And this budget is the last year's growing or lowering?
Sorry,
This budget on the last years, does it growing or decreasing?
Okay. Well, it's over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been declining because of the because of the financial situation.
Yeah.
Although the decline has been, in England, we would regard the decline as being static rather than declining. It's such a small decline. Whereas in England, public library branches, I think there's something like 500 closed in the past 2 years. Nothing like that has happened in Sweden. So it's been a modest decline in the budgets, not a really significant decline.
Does it affect the negotiation between publishers and libraries on ebooks?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, the question is, does the question about ebook loaning in libraries most about budget issues or something more like that, library role and library representation in the...
Yeah, it's both of these things. The big problem that the librarians experience, apart from the budgetary problem, is the fact that they cannot make use of their professional skills in developing the resource, the appropriate resource for the community. They can't do that with ebooks. They can do it with printed books, they can't do it with ebooks. So they feel a diminution in their professional responsibility, their professional role.
And my next question is about preservation. In France, we have some discussions about the way for libraries to provide the preservation of ebooks they want to offer in a historical way. And does the preservation stack present is in Swedish discussions?
Right. That hasn't been raised as an issue. Now, I'm not sure what the situation is here, but Sweden's Royal Library has the archive of the web, the Swedish web. They keep everything Swedish on the web in the archive. They have the usual copyright deposit requirements of any national library, and I think that that will apply to ebooks as well, because I think that the publishers will have to deposit ebooks with the National Library, although I can't be absolutely certain that that's the case, something I need to find out. So if they do have the right to demand ebooks from the publishers, then they will be putting them into their preservation program. And it may be that the National Repository Library at Umeå, which is this repository of printed material, it could well be that in the future they may be developed so that they're also an electronic repository. I think one thing you can be sure about is that the Swedes are examining this problem and will do something about it.
I'm sure.
This is the way they tend to work. In the UK, we would have 3 royal commissions and do nothing, but in Sweden, they will have a meeting and do something.
I won't answer about the situation in France about that, but the last session of our seminar, we talk about the situation in Switzerland. And in Switzerland, we saw that there is a main relation between the situation of ebook loan in libraries and illegal uses because the the law in Switzerland is maybe something like more permissive about illegal access to ebooks. So
Okay.
it's the main issues for libraries because they have to provide some added value services to their users to make them interested by their ebook offer.
Right. Right.
How is that? How is the Swedish situation about this? Is there a relation between illegal uses for ebooks and ebook offer in libraries?
I don't think there's any data on that at all.
Mm-hmm.
In the SOM survey, we asked the general population, the respondents in the survey, where they got their ebook from. From the public library, from an online bookseller, or elsewhere. Elsewhere could be anywhere, but elsewhere is most likely to be a pirate site. And since Pirate Bay was developed in Sweden, although no one knows where it is quite at the minute, there may be a connection. But overall, it seems that ebook use is so low in Sweden anyway that I can't see the piracy issue being a significant problem. You know, if 91.4% of the population have never used an ebook,
yeah,
the number of people pirating them must be tiny.
Yeah, but it's interesting, the paradox in Sweden between the EDIB interior, I don't know the word, the previous, yes, that EDIB was one of the first response to the ebook law in library in Europe, and the situation of ebook market in Sweden. It's very, I think this paradox is very interesting because in France we have some some declaration about the role of library of ebooks offer in library in the development of the ebook market. There is an hypothesis about saying that the growth of ebook offer in library can be a way for the ebook market to develop.
Yeah, well, I think that's certainly the case in Sweden because of the significance of the libraries in the book market generally. But without the public libraries, the publishers don't have an ebook market. Yeah. Because it's so tiny. So yes, the development of an ebook market is absolutely crucially dependent upon the libraries being able to lend. And of course, with the change in the public library law, with effect from January 2015, last month, libraries are now required by law to provide access to the material in whatever form. So, you know, the connection is there and it's going to stay there and it's probably going to grow.
And what's about the French publisher with your public libraries? Is there any negotiation with some French publisher with Swedish libraries?
Some negotiation.
Between French publisher offer.
Not that I'm aware. Not that I'm aware of. No, I'm not aware of any such negotiation.
You don't know about that?
No. We have done a survey of authors. Well, it's still in process, actually. We have about another 5 Swedish authors to interview about their reaction to the ebook phenomenon. And we find something of an age difference. The older authors are not really interested. in ebooks, while the younger authors are interested in ebooks. And then you have another dichotomy over the issue of piracy. The established authors and the popular authors are very concerned about piracy, because for them it means a loss of sales. Whereas the self-publishing authors and the younger authors are more interested in getting an audience. And if piracy is going to increase their audience, they're quite happy about that.
Yeah.
So you get these, not authors are all of the same opinion about these matters.
Isn't there any social network that promote ebook for readers? Libraries thought about making a network inside the library to promote ebook, to let people talk about ebook.
Yes, yes, okay, yes. So yeah, reading promotion is very big in Sweden. As I said, the Swedish Arts Council is the body responsible for, let's say, oversight of the public library system. And one of the strong elements in the public library law, one of the functions with which libraries are tasked, is to promote reading, right? And you can see the effect of this in the Book and Libraries Fair in Gothenburg every year. This is one of the biggest book fairs in Europe, and it is an absolutely amazing event, because it is not simply for the publishing industry. It was established years ago by a publisher and a librarian who got together and said, we'll have a book fair. And it is still called the Books and Libraries Fair, not just the book fair. And thousands of people come through the doors, ordinary citizens come through the doors at every year. Right? And so you can see the impact of reading promotion by the audience figures for the book fair. Right? So it's a huge phenomenon in Gothenburg. And we were there, we had a stand there. The library school here has a stand at the Gothenburg Fair every year. And we had visitors from booksellers and publishers and so forth, finding out about library training and how it affected their businesses and so on and so forth. So there's quite a big connection between public libraries in Sweden and the publishing industry. Quite a big connection in a number of different levels. And one of the things that the county libraries are charged specifically with is reading promotion. That's one of the things that they seek to do in their communities. So there's a lot of it goes on.
My question is about the evolution of the situation in Sweden. Do you think that there is a risk for libraries from facing the new Amazon offer, something like Kindle Unlimited? The fact is that this model is close to a library model. You pay a
subscription.
Yes, a subscription for €1 1 month, and you have unlimited access to books. It's
going to be interesting to watch what happens, because it's not the only such subscription service, as you're aware. I mean, you have Scribed, which operates in UK and USA, Oyster, which operates in the USA, There are a couple of Swedish subscription services, a Danish one, another one based in Britain, and there's also, I think, a French service, at least one French service, and a Spanish service, a subscription service for books. So it's a growing phenomenon. Nobody knows exactly whether or not they're making a profit because no financial data have been released by any of them. And they don't have complete coverage of all publishers. For example, Scribd has HarperCollins and Simon & Schuster, and just recently Macmillan put about 1,000 books into their service. But you're still talking about a service that has 500,000 books. And in fact, I was given a subscription to Scribd. I bought some photography software, and as a result of buying the software, they gave me a subscription to Scribd for a year. And, you know, I'm never without a book to read, clearly. And so I think the impact of these services could well be significant at some point in the future. But I think for it to be significant, you have to see the usage of ebooks in general growing. Right? If the growth in the use of ebooks stabilizes at around 20% of sales, then I think growth of the subscription services is not going to happen, because you don't have the required number of devices being used in the community for this purpose. And so the subscription services are unlikely to go, because I see them, we call it piggybacking, riding on the back of the pig, right? The pig is the growth of ebooks. The rider on top of that is the subscription service, right? And if the growth of ebooks went up to 50%, then at that point the subscription services could well affect demand on public library services, because if these services begin to cover more and more publishers to the point at which they have several million volumes available, then that could constitute a very real threat to public libraries. So it's a very uncertain world, I think, that particular issue. We're watching it with quite some interest here in the project, because and one of the things we'll be asking in our public library survey is whether or not they have felt any impact yet from subscription services.
Do you think that libraries, public libraries and publishers have to work together? Because instead of we are going to see a model, not a social model for reading, but a personal, commercial reading model.
Yes, I think so. I think you're probably aware of the American Library Association's efforts to negotiate more closely with publishers in order to overcome some of the problems they've been experiencing with ebooks. And they found that the publishers were really quite ignorant of the public library activities. And so I think, yes, that the more that the public libraries and publishers can work together to there's an interesting little phenomenon which has cropped up here in Sweden. One of the major publishers has carried out its own investigation into the impact of lending ebooks on its own sales. For a period of time, they made books available that otherwise they would not have made available, recent bestsellers. They made them available through eLib, and they monitored the use and they monitored the sales of the same book. And they found that the only impact that lending the books had was to increase the sales. right? So they've now decided to put all of their books into eLib without embargo, because they figured out that they actually get a benefit from doing so. Right? And I think it's that kind of negotiation and that kind of experiment that demonstrates to publishers that they have nothing to fear, which is going to change things.
But previously you say that there are no individual market for books in Sweden.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
I can't understand.
Yes, yes. Well, there's a small individual market for books.
Yeah.
16% of the population, 16% of sales, yes. Yes.
My question is about the development of the self-publishing activities.
Okay.
On the US markets, the self-publishing is something going quite huge on the market, and some in part because of the Amazon offer, services offer in that. In some libraries, we can observe, in the US, we observe the development of a kind of self-publishing services offered by the library.
Yes, yes, yes.
To help to support people who want to produce some self-published book about the cities or something that can be in the preservation of the memory
Yes,
of
yes.
the library. That's the same phenomenon. Yeah. Is